Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's the 8 o'clock hour now on this holiday, President's Day in your nation's capital. Thanks for joining us here on O'Connor and Company. We're going to hand it off to Chris Plant in just 60 minutes, but between now and then, got much more to discuss, including the transgender funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York that we saw last week, and also are Democrats starting to turn on Joe Biden? I mean,
why would they?
What's there to turn on at this point? I mean, honestly. And did you see the story that there's a special Secret Service person who's now assigned to the detail to make sure he doesn't fall down the stairs of the Air Force One? And it's the short stairs,
It's
too.
the short stairs, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty soon they're going to put in an escalator.
Joining us right now is Zack Smith. He's a legal fellow and manager of the Supreme Court and Appellate Advocacy Program over there at the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Zack, I'm so sorry we run out of time. I had to give your title, and that ate up about 17 minutes.
Well, that's all right, Larry. It's great being with you.
So Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, she runs on a campaign platform of elect me and I'll get Donald Trump. And, I mean, I say this for her, at least she followed through on her campaign promise because she concocted this civil prosecution of Donald Trump for his business practices in New York. Judge hands down a $360 million penalty. Where to begin on this? First of all, the law. I guess that would be a good place to start. Zack, this law that was applied to Donald Trump, has it been applied like this, as far as you know, in this manner at any time in history since it's been on the books?
No, this is an unusual case in a lot of ways, like you mentioned, Larry. Look, Letitia James, she ran on the campaign promise to essentially, as you said, get Donald Trump. When she brought this case, she was asking for about $370 million in damages, a record sum. She got pretty close with the judgment that this judge handed down. But this New York law, it's unique in a lot of ways, and it's particularly unique in that it doesn't require the Attorney General to prove that the defendant acted with fraudulent intent. They didn't have to intend to defraud anyone, and they don't have to show that there were any victims. And that's a good thing because based on the testimony that came out at trial, it doesn't seem like anyone was victimized by Donald Trump's conduct. You know, we heard a lot about potentially fraudulent statements, corporate statements, potentially fraudulent transactions related to various loans. But keep in mind, the counterparties to Donald Trump in most of these real estate transactions were very sophisticated financial institutions, big banks that we would all know, are household names. We all know the names of them. And so the idea that somehow they were defrauded and yet that they didn't lose any money, continued to do business with Donald Trump and the Trump organizations, it just defies common sense to say that they were defrauded in these cases, and yet that's what this judge in the state of New York found.
This is, to those watching, and certainly to those who are not lawyers and not part of the legal profession, this looks incredibly damaging to the American judicial system, and yet she's being celebrated by the media and, the left in general. Is there anything that can bring this back, can sort of stop this sort of abuse? I mean, we see Elise Stefanik issuing she filed a complaint with a committee on professional standards in New York. We talked to Joe DeGeneva just a few minutes ago, and he said they won't do anything. Is there anything that can be done about this sort of abuse of power and using the courts in this way?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is incredibly damaging to our judicial system and the confidence that we can all have in it. You mentioned a complaint essentially to the State Bar Association there, to the association that oversees judges in the state of New York, and you're right, they probably won't do anything. In fact, my colleague and I, we just had a piece out in the Federalist talking about the double standard that many state bar associations appear to be applying to lawyers who represented Donald Trump in past cases. They're very aggressively pursuing them compared to some of these left-leaning prosecutors and other lawyers who have committed misconduct while in office. The state bar associations don't or are not aggressively pursuing them. Now, the good thing in this case in New York, I suspect there will be an appeal coming out of it. I don't know if that appeal will be successful. Every member of New York's highest court right now has been appointed by either Andrew Cuomo or Kathy Hochul. So I don't know that there will be much hope for getting this overturned. But for now, this isn't the last word, and Donald Trump and his legal team, I suspect, will continue to aggressively litigate this case.
Yeah, and Zach, listen, that absolutely is gratifying in terms of Donald Trump personally and his business concerns, and good for him that he pursues every recourse for an appeal and overturn of this unjust decision. But for we, the American people, this isn't just a businessman being found civilly liable in a courtroom in New York as a standalone, because he also happens to be the leading candidate for president. He's leading in the national polls. He's leading in the battleground polls for the Electoral College. This affects me. This affects people who would like to vote for him or would like him to be the president of the United States. It wasn't an assault on Trump. It was an assault on our election process. Where's our recourse?
Well, at least right now in the polls, Donald Trump is benefiting, I think, from these, not only this case in New York, but also the debacle that's taking place down in Atlanta. Simultaneously with the decision being released in New York, there was also the hearing in Atlanta with Fani Willis, Nathan Wade, and kind of the entire sordid tale that's happening there. And I think the American people, they understand what's happening. And because they see this, I think many, even some on the left, unfortunately not everyone on the left, but some on the left see this and recognize that this is a very harmful thing for us as a nation.
If I may, Zach, and I just want to jump in here because you said, some on the left, but not all the left. You know why most Democrats and most people on the left right now aren't actually concerned about the incredible abuse of power and overreach that we're seeing in New York right now? Because they know Republicans won't do it back to them. And I know that you're a heritage guy and that you care about the rule of law, and I love that about you. I do. I love that about your whole shop over there, from Cully Stimson to Hans von Spakovsky. You guys are legit and you're straight shooters and you really care about the law. But as an American citizen and as a Republican, I want every single Republican attorney general right now to start the case against Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. That's the only way it stops, Zach, is if there's fear that a politician be, subjected to the same weapons and abuse that they inflict on one side of the political equation.
Yeah, well, I will say this, Larry. When all of this first started, this lawfare against Donald Trump first started, and there's a lot of it, there's also the criminal case in New York, there's the federal cases being brought by Jack Smith. John Yoo, he's a professor out at UC Berkeley, conservative commentator all the time. He essentially made your same point. He said, one of the reasons these norms have not been broken in the past is that both parties recognize that what is good for the goose today is going to be good for the gander tomorrow. And that likely, you may see Republican attorney generals, Republican district attorneys moving to indict Joe Biden or a member of the Biden family in the future. And that should give everyone, pause.
Well, and then, of course, the preemptive strike against anything like that happening is if you let Donald Trump back into the White House, he'll weaponize the justice system and our court system to punish his political enemies, which I don't know, Zach. I mean, it feels like that's exactly what they're doing here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, unfortunately, it's ironic. Merrick Garland came into office. He's the attorney general, obviously, pledging to be apolitical and, impartial, fairly administering the law. And yet, if you look at his conduct and the conduct of the Justice Department under his leadership over the past, several years, it's been one of the most politicized Justice Departments in recent memory. And again, that's not a good thing for us as a country.
All right, Zach, we got to leave it there. Thank you. Thanks for hearing me rant, too. I appreciate it. You're very tolerant. Also, another hallmark.
Always a good time.
Of Heritage folks. Zach Smith there. He is the legal fellow and manager of that. Oh, he's at Heritage Foundation. I don't have time for that whole title, for crying out loud. His business card is continued on the other side.
It really was a long title.